Okay. Hey there, Marina. Can you hear me? You can hear me, but I don't think I can hear you yet. Maybe. How about now?
Can
So
you
I
hear
think I
me?
can hear you. You sound great. I
Oh,
tried this.
good.
I tried this banner so it could just stick there when we were kind of getting stuff done in the background. The only thing that I don't know is if it'll allow you to add your audiences. So I just want to double check to make sure.
Yeah, I'm doing my audiences right now. Just also,
How,
I
how do you?
added a link to,
Oh, you did. Perfect.
yeah, I added a link to have people check out their own doshas.
Oh, cool. Super cool.
Yep.
Let me go
So,
there. Share screen. Share screen. Window. Share. Cool.
actually, hold on. Let me try to. Okay, I think I know how to do this. Hold on.
Oh, perfect. They both are live now. There's a double Marina. Oh, now she's gone.
Can you
Yeah,
hear me?
you sound
Okay,
good.
yeah, I just transitioned to a different window. Yeah. So I am all set.
Let's do it. Okay, so I think I just hide this, and then you and I will both pop on. And there we are. Hey, everybody, it's Kevin and Marina in the Herbalism Show. Today, we're talking about an intro to Ayurveda, and I will make sure that I'm saying that correctly with Marina after we come back from running our banner here. We're really excited to talk about different approaches to medicine. This one is a really interesting one on how it plays a role in modern healthcare and how we can start weaving and integrating in. And as you guys can see, we're going to do our own dosha quiz. We'll be back in a sec. All right, Marina. So walk us through. I'll pull the dosha quiz down for a sec so you can educate us all on the life of Marina, which I've missed you. Feels like I haven't talked to you forever, but I did talk to you on Monday, so I guess that counts. But what's been going on? What's good? What's happening next?
So I realized what event you wanted me to mention last time. So before I forget, I'm just going to mention that next week on June 20th, Tuesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern, I'm having a free webinar discussing the history of medicine and the shared roots between pharmacy and herbalism, which obviously, yeah, that's one of my passions that I always talk about. And how do we bring this lost knowledge right back into the fold of conventional and everyday medicine and life. So please tune in, and I'm going to drop another link under here so you can sign up for that.
Amazing. No, I'm super excited. That'll be so much fun. So that ties in really well with you going through the history of things. And I think one thing that's deeply kind of interwoven in the history of medicine and traditional medicine is we're talking about today, Marina. So tell me all about the word that I have always struggled to be able to pronounce, Ayurveda. Am I correct?
You are correct, my friend. Yeah, I hear it pronounced all sorts of different ways, but really what it means is the wisdom and the study of life. So it's existed for centuries. It's one of the most ancient art forms of medicine, and this is actually why we call medicine a practice, right? Because it's just as much a science as it is an art, because there's an art to having a bedside manner and to having interactions and communication. And we mentioned placebo and nocebo in the past. It's mindset, it's relationships, it's trust, it's everything. So it's really that wisdom, because we live in a biological and a living body. We're living, breathing organisms. And as we talked about last time when I introduced you all to Chinese medicine, the energetic part is what maybe the scientist within the conventional and allopathic practitioner is a little bit wary of and not sure what that even means. And it sounds maybe a little crazy and a little woo. But really, life and healing, which is another concept that me and you, Kevin, were challenged to define at a recent conference, the Healers in Healthcare Conference. It really, to me, is all about having a fluid dynamic homeostasis as we are dealing with the changes that are inevitable in life and everyday circumstances. So it's the way our body is designed is to be able to deal with whatever outside or even inside circumstances are going on, and having its own healing and negative and positive feedback cycles to do exactly what it's supposed to do, which is number one, keep us alive, keep us safe. Number two is help us thrive and feel good. And so in Ayurveda, before, again, we had this nitty gritty evidence-based science to back up our theories about how things work and how the body heals itself. We sort of observed the elements in nature around us, and then also assumed that we have similar microcosms of these elements and these energetic principles within us. And if we could learn how to balance those elements, and learn which element maybe is out of balance so that we can bring it back, so kind of diagnose and define the disharmony and the disbalance as something that we need to work on, and then bring back into the individual harmony. And the beautiful thing is there was this assumption that everybody is different. Everybody, right, is different.
Yep.
So the key is figuring out what is your body's best way of being in balance, and how do we attune those elements best for your particular body.
Interesting. So here's the funny thing, Marina, and I'm sure a lot of people have experienced this. When you look up traditional Chinese medicine, like the first thing when I was looking that up before our show the other day is usually a comparator, like between here's TCM, like traditional Chinese medicine, and here's Western medicine, and giving some approaches back and forth. Then I was even able to pull up a couple graphics for us that showed herbalism from a Western perspective and from a Chinese perspective. The first things that I pull up, Marina, I'd love for you to be able to address these for a lot of our colleagues, because I'm sure you've seen them and heard them with Ayurveda before, is that you pull up Ayurveda, what is it? And you know what hits me right in the face as a practitioner? Not a lot of clinical studies or evidence behind it. It is one of the oldest approaches, but doesn't have a lot of clinical trials related to it. And several of their preparations related to it may help with pain, osteoarthritis, etc., but also could be toxic, related to lead and or arsenic components. So that's a brutal thing, like, as from a conceptual standpoint, to go, oh, good, I want to look into this. And right off the bat, it tells me no evidence, no trials, and dangerous.
Yeah.
About that. Let's jump into that.
Great point. And this goes across the board for any of these lost arts and ancient principles, except for religion, right? Religion seems to be the only thing that kind of survived through the ages. And even religion had its own history of where the monotheistic religions originated from and what they took from other cultures. And now we sort of have this separation of church and state, right? And I would say it's the same thing, but we can't really separate politics sometimes out of what has happened to medicine. It should be separated, right? But somehow we're just seeing like these things that sometimes don't make logical sense are here. Like here's religion, here's science, here's the particular religion, here's the particular science that we want you to do. But the reality is all cultures across the globe had their own origin story with medicine. And a lot of it had to do with plant medicine being that backbone, that forefront, that grandfather or grandmother that led us to pharmaceutical science and medicine today, which is why you should really tune into my webinar where we'll really talk about all of that. But the reality is everything could be sort of like a parable, right? And just because they didn't know that science behind it doesn't mean their observations were wrong, right? And the way that we apply Ayurveda, let's say, and which formulas we then create and how do we manufacture those things, which then introduces that element of human error. I saw you comment on LinkedIn, right, on somebody's post about how distributors, sometimes can allocate forfeit medications, right? How do we know what exactly you're getting? What is the quality control, right, of these supplements or drugs? We have to treat them the same way. And so there is less regulation about it, which is why people are more scared of it. But even in those things that are very well regulated, mistakes happen and harm could be done. So we always have to be very wary when there's something that's growing right in your plant, in your backyard, in your garden, outside, that you can identify and that you know what it's sprayed with or not sprayed with, and what you can then use in an Ayurvedic way or a Chinese medicine way for the purposes of the plant that we are sure of because it has been documented, versus you buying something that could potentially have that tamper factor.
So for the most part, it's really a quote unquote purity issue then, Marina. What you're telling me is there's some level of government or laboratory oversight and a purity component saying that we cannot guarantee some of these individual things may or may not contain these other substances that could be toxic. And so to me, like that's a non-medical like argument. What it ends up being is just purely related to an industrial argument that yes, we need to have pure products. We do. Like we need to make sure that we have safe products for the folks who we're utilizing them in, and have any things that could be a quote unquote toxin at sustainable levels that we're not consuming at very high levels. Well, guess what? That's about everything on earth, right? That we have toxic levels and non-toxic levels. So, okay, that's really helpful to dispel that component.
Those mix the poison.
Yes. Yeah. And so I think when we're dosing our poisons, and we've been doing it for some of the longest that we've ever done it before, break down really like what Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, and Western medicine, like where do we kind of have the interplay? And then I know we want to get to doshas, but give us that breakdown. Like what is the difference when we're thinking about these practices in Ayurveda?
Yes. So Western, if you're talking about Western American herbalism, is also an energetic component to Western American herbalism. And it has to do with temperature. It has to do with tissue state. So it evolved from some of these other cultures from Europe and from the Middle East. And so then when it came to America, they kind of made their own. And there's some leading herbalists that helped shape it. And then there was homeopathy that was born out of that. There was flower essences that was born out of that, covering all of that in that webinar. But with Ayurveda specifically, it's similar to what we spoke about last time with Chinese medicine, in that it is this energetic and elemental system. So it recognizes 5 main elements, which in Chinese medicine 5 phases and the 5 stages. So same here, you can think of the number 5, and these 5 elements form in pairs. If we pair 2 of them together, they form the 3 main doshas, which I know we wanted to get to today. So the 5 of them are ether, which is that beginning, right? It's the space, the environment. It's also called the akasha, and if you heard of Akashic records, sort of a similar name to say that this is the field of potentiality, essentially. Then the next element is air. And this signifies movement. It signifies the mind, and direction, change, communication. And this is also similar to people, if you heard of the tarot system. It's kind of the sword. Then there's fire. Fire means energy. It means passion, digestion. We have that digestive fire. And transformation, right? Fire is that element. And then we have water. Water, as you know, is cohesive and adhesive. So it's like this fluid dynamic force. And you could think about this also as the waters that are within your body. And then also within the earth, right? And the earth is that final element where it's just that soil, it's matter, it's solid, it's foundational, it's heavy, it's substantial, but it's also like where life does spring from as well. And this can represent like organs, muscles, bones, teeth, tendons. So all of these elements, when you group them in pairs, they form 3 main types of doshas. What we call doshas are like your particular constitution that makes you up. So you have 2 main elements that are dominant in your particular body. And it also can resonate, which last time I mentioned, like periods of life. So for example, when you're born and when you're growing up as a child, you're dominant in the kapha dosha, and kapha is your earth and your water element. And that makes sense because that child often, if you think about childhood illnesses, even they're all often congested, lots of colds, mucus. So that's all like watery and earth together. And those are kind of what the child also can be like a little bit, how do I say this? The child has a little bit of bulk because we want the child to be a little bit chubby and not skinny. And we want them to have that growth hormone, right? And it's kind of slow to change as well, even though when we think about a child, they actually develop pretty fast. But that earth element and a personality type assessment means that you're stable, you're secure, and you are slow to change, but you are like a very steady person. That's the stability piece, right? Then the next period of your life is like when you're a young adult to your middle age, and that's your pitta period, which is fire and water. And so here there's like a lot of transformation. You start having your career, your passion, like becoming who you are, self-actualizing in life. And these are the people that are very like if you're a person that's pitta, you're very symmetric, you're beautiful, you're muscular, you're outgoing. You may be balding if you're a male because it's like that CEO personality where it's just fiery. And we say like the fire in the head just burns the hair right off. So for that male pattern baldness. So that's kind of the Ayurvedic approach there. And then the end of your life, towards the end, you get into your Vata state, which is the ether and the air elements, which means that you're closer then to, that realm that we don't see, the unseen, the spiritual. You are very creative in your head. If you're a Vata type person, you're very irregular. So things could always be shifting and moving. And so depending on which area of life you're in, which stage of life, and what dominant dosha speaks to you at any given time, we talk about how to balance that, right? And there's actually two concepts of prakriti and vikriti. So your prakriti is like what constitution feels best for you and what you had at birth. And then the vikriti may be like how it shifted and went out of balance, and maybe you changed your constitution. So we always kind of want to put you back into your birth dosha versus maybe your unbalanced current dosha.
Wow, what a fascinating way to break down a psychological makeup of an individual, and then try to balance those. So from a practitioner standpoint, when we're talking about utilizing these doshas and then looking at your overall constitution, if we look at an individual and we recognize like here is their mix that they're looking at, and it was Vikriti, is that correct?
Vikriti, yeah, Vikriti is like what's out of balance currently.
What's out of balance currently, and then to rebalance things. Well, what's our thought then from our experiences to be able to create that balance? Because I'm guessing that is the large part of the medicine component, is providing that balance shift. Okay.
Yeah. So, and it's everything, right? So anything you do in life can be leading you closer to health or taking you further away from health. So we want to identify what's causing the disbalance, right? So a lot of times I'll just give you an overview, like here in New York specifically, and in young people, the Vata is extremely dominant, like for people that are always anxious, right? So they're in their mind. They don't have a regular sleep schedule, eating schedule. They're like, go, 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 rushing around, trying to accomplish things, trying to win at life, but they're throwing themselves off balance and burning themselves out. So we want to then ground them. We want to make them more regular. We want to give them a consistent schedule. But also we know that they're a little bit erratic, so we don't want to make it hard. So we tell them, listen, just do this one thing once a day, and they will be more likely to follow through. So we need to know like what's their learning style, how they're going to accept, what your recommendation is. And then down to the actual recommendation, we always want to start with lifestyle. But then the beauty of Ayurveda is it also makes it easy to put into your life, because a lot of it is food is medicine based. A lot of it is adding spices, specific spices into your food. So you don't necessarily have to go to that industrialized manufactured route. You could just load up your food because you're going to have to eat anyway, right? So make your food medicine.
Interesting. So for that very high anxiety individual that is looking to go nonstop, seeing all the stressor hormones, all the things that we think from the Western medicine standpoint, here's the neurochemical pathways that are starting and unfortunately going in the wrong direction and they're out of balance. And so we try to balance them back with using a pharmaceutical agent to be able to help them, or use cognitive behavioral therapy or any other, modality inside of the current like psychiatry realm. In the Ayurveda space, you're saying that we could see these things and potentially, because we see them and we know that the successful route is to bridge them slowly, and to do so by adding spices or other elements to individual foods that have a property that helps bring them back to balance. Any examples, Marina, on this could be a first step? Like say that Kevin is super high stress and that I'm balding. Thankfully, I'm not. Thankfully, not balding yet. But say that that's the case. Super high stress, balding, difficult to sleep. Like what would be some of the first things that we recommended in Ayurveda to be able to say, this is what could help? And have those been translated already to Western medicine? We're using them without knowing.
Yeah, so we would see what dosha may be out of balance and then also what element too. So in your case, it could be the vata and the pitta are both kind of hyper. And maybe you want to add in some more kapha for you. So that kapha would be that more grounding, more solid, more like regular schedule, like I said, and like kind of slower. So we want to maybe slow your pace down a little bit, get you maybe even in soil, because kapha is about the ground, the nature and soil, get you to have some nature therapy, right? Like spend more time like physically grounding your body with the ground, right? And then from medicine, we use root medicine. So we use plants that have these deep roots. So we would use things like burdock or dandelion from the Western medicine tradition. I kind of mix and match sometimes. We would use specific foods that are more filling, right? Like more fats, more protein rich foods versus like the vata person who forgets to eat and like just, maybe they are vegan, right? Often. So maybe we want to encourage if they're not completely opposed to like heavier, denser, solid foods, and then the appropriate herbs and spices too, depending on maybe they want to cool them down. Maybe they're too hot, right, with the pitta. So we want some minty things that cool them down. So aromatic substances. We can have like a draining sort of effect with the spices as well, maybe fermented foods that are like more salty. So things like that.
So many concepts, Marina, that I'm sure you've tied together, long before I even thought of them. But it's so interesting to hear you kind of break these things down and me to think about these individuals and some of the disease states I'm anticipating them having issues with, like issues with bowel consistency, overall, and making sure that they have quality fibers in their diet to slow some things down. And then seeing that they have high stressors. And a lot of times, a lot of data that I've read in long-term care settings is using lavender to be able to have some kind of olfactory sensory component to be able to de-stress or to have a sense of kind of security, in a space. And so those things are like direct ties, that maybe we're speaking a slightly different language, right? But is that where you'd like a lot of the Western practitioners to recognize, like the concepts aren't that foreign, we're talking maybe a little bit of translation?
Yeah, and the studies are out there, like especially in Ayurvedic spices and herbs, culinary spices and herbs. And if you look at the Indian, like studies coming out of India, there's so much out there about these plants. So it's not like they don't exist. We just have to be looking for them, and they're out there.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for joining. I hope you really enjoyed it just like I did. Marina, one more time on where do people need to go to be able to see you live and in living color?
Go to the American Herbalist Guild and sign up for my webinar, and I'll drop that exact link down below.
Awesome. Everybody have a wonderful day. Marina, it's always good to see you.
You too, Kevin. Bye.